Two people, the same $100,000, the same market, the same 20 years. John got his in March of 2026. His mother's estate settled, the wire landed, and the balance read $100,000 even. Carla got hers the same month. An equity payout from a company that finally sold after 9 years. Same number, same week. Same S&P 500 waiting on the other side of the decision. John is an operations manager. He earns $92,000 a year and has never missed a payment in his life. Carla is a project lead. She earns $81,000 a year, which is $11,000 less than John earns. Both of them sat down and made a plan. Both of them were certain their plan was the responsible one. 20 years later, John's $100,000 is worth 105 to 89. Carla's is worth 466 down 96. That is a gap of 368.07 from the same starting number in the same market over the same 2 decades. And here's the part that should bother you. Carla did not pick better investments than John. She did not earn a higher return. She did not find a secret account or a private deal. She did exactly one thing differently, and it is almost certainly not the thing you are thinking of right now. Most people believe wealth is a selection problem. Better funds, better stocks, better timing. So they go hunting for the Millionaires investment, as if there is a specific ticker symbol that separates the two households. Here is what the data actually shows. In 2025, the S&P 500 returned 17.88%. The average equity fund investor returned 17.16%. That is a gap of 0.72%. DALBAR has been measuring that gap since 1985, and 2025 produced the third smallest one on record. Ordinary investors have gotten dramatically better at picking, and it changed almost nothing about who ends up wealthy. Because the distance between John and Carla is not a returns gap. It never was. Ramsey Solutions surveyed 10,000 millionaires, the largest study of its kind ever conducted. 79% of them inherited nothing, not a dollar. Only 3% inherited $1 million or more. 8 out of 10 came from families at or below middle income. The top 5 careers on the list were engineer, accountant, teacher, management, and attorney. Teacher is on that list. Read that again. These are not people with better information than you have. They are people running a different default. And that default becomes visible in exactly one moment, more clearly than at any other time. The moment a large, unexpected sum of money lands in the account. $100,000 is the perfect stress test. It is large enough to change the shape of a life. It is also small enough that most people spend it without ever noticing they spent it. Jay Zagorski, a research scientist at Ohio State, tracked what Americans actually do with inherited money. On average, people save about half. They spend, donate, or simply lose the other half. Among people who received $100,000 or more, 19% spent the entire thing, not most of it. All of it. Every dollar gone, with nothing structural to show for it. Over the next 25 minutes, I am going to walk you through both households, line by line, dollar by dollar. Let's keep this fair. Same market for both. Both portfolios earn 8% a year, which is roughly the long-run average after inflation is ignored. No stock picking, no day trading, no crypto, no leverage. Both of them buy the same broad index fund. Same 20-year window, March 2026 to March 2046. Either one gets a better decade than the other. Same $100,000. Arriving on the same kind of Tuesday, into the same kind of checking account. If Carla ends up ahead, it will not be because she was handed a better market. Now let's meet the two plans. John's plan is the one almost every financially responsible person in America would recognize. He sat at his kitchen table with a legal pad and did what he was taught to do. First, kill the debt. He had $1,800 left on 2 car loans, and $6,900 on a credit card, then a cushion. He moved $6,700 into savings so the emergency fund would finally look serious. That is $32,000 gone, and every dollar of it went towards something a financial advisor would applaud. Second, the house. John and his wife had been talking about moving for 4 years. A bigger place, better school district, 12 minutes closer to her job. They put $40,000 down on the upgrade. Third, the car. His truck had 187,000 miles on it and a check engine light he had learned to ignore. He put $18,000 toward a new SUV and financed the rest. At $640 a month. Fourth, the life. $10,000 for a trip with his wife and daughter, and a laptop for his son's first year of college. That leaves $25,000. John opened a brokerage account and invested every dollar of it, added up. $32,000 to debt and savings, $40,000 to the house, $18,000 to the car, $10,000 to living, $25,000 invested. Nothing on that list is stupid. Nothing on that list is irresponsible. That is exactly the problem. Now Carla. Carla's $100,000 landed on a Thursday. She did not touch it for 19 days. That is not a personality trait. It was a written rule she had made 3 years earlier, before any windfall existed. On day 20, she moved the entire balance into a taxable brokerage account and bought a total market index fund. All of it. $100,000, one transaction, one fund, and then she deliberately deleted the app from her phone. She did not pay off her car because the loan was at 3.9% and the money could earn 8%. She did not upgrade the house because the house she had already covered every requirement she actually had. She did not increase a single recurring monthly obligation. Not one. Here is the detail everyone misses. Carla was not richer than John when the money arrived. She earned $11,000 less. She had a smaller emergency fund. Her car had 140,000 miles on it. Her net worth in March 2026 was $71,000. John's was $214,000, mostly home equity. John was, by every visible measure, the wealthier person on the day the money hit. 20 years later, he is behind by $360,807. So what actually happened between those two dates? Let's run the numbers. The single most expensive window in the life of a windfall is the first 3 days. Not because people go on a spree, because of something quieter and much more permanent. In the first 72 hours, the money has not yet been assigned an identity. It is not retirement money. It is not house money. It is not emergency money. It is just a number sitting in checking, next to the grocery balance and the utility autopay. And money without an identity gets absorbed into whatever the account is already used for. Behavioral economists call this mental accounting, and it is the whole ballgame. John's $100,000 sat in his checking account for 6 weeks while he made decisions. During those 6 weeks, it was surrounded by every ordinary expense his household has ever had. By the time he made his plan, the money had already quietly stopped feeling like a windfall. It felt like a large checking balance, and a large checking balance gets spent like a checking balance. Carla's rule was 19 days of not touching it, but the rule had a second half nobody notices. She moved it out of checking on day 1 into a separate account she had opened for exactly this purpose. The waiting happened somewhere the money could not be casually spent. That is the difference between a cooling-off period and a temptation period. Zagorski's research found that heirs save roughly half of what they receive. Half. That is the average American outcome for money that took someone a lifetime to accumulate. And among people receiving $100,000 or more, nearly 1 in 5 spends every dollar. Those people are not reckless. They are people whose money never got a name. This is the misconception that costs the most, because it sends you looking in the wrong place entirely. If the Millionaires' advantage were investment selection, the gap would show up in returns data. It does not. DALBAR measured a 0.72% gap between the S&P 500 and the average equity investor in 2025, less than 0.75 percentage point, and the third smallest gap since 1985. Now here is the number that reframes everything. In 2024, that same gap was 8.48%. Same investors, same funds available, same information. An 8-fold swing in a single year. What changed was not skill. What changed was how much people traded during a scary year. That is the entire mechanism. The gap is a behavior gap, and it opens and closes with fear. Both John and Carla bought the same broad index fund. Both earned the same 8%. Carla's advantage was never the fund. It was the number of times she interrupted it. Fidelity counted 645,000 401k millionaires at the end of the first quarter of 2026. Almost none of them got there by finding a better fund than the one in your plan menu. They got there by contributing into the same 3 or 4 index options everyone else has access to for 25 years without stopping. The average 401k balance in that same report was $141,000. The millionaires in the $141,000 accounts are frequently invested in literally the same fund. Run the numbers on that for a second. Same fund, same market. 7 times the balance. Let's follow John's money to the ground and see where it physically ends up. $8,400 went to 2 car loans. Those cars are now worth a combined $9,100 and falling. $6,900 went to a credit card, which is genuinely good, and which he had run back up to $4,200 within 2 years. $700 went to an emergency fund earning 4% for 18 months, then 3.6, then 2.9. $40,000 went into a house that cannot be partially sold, borrowed against cheaply, or accessed in an emergency. $18,000 went into a vehicle that lost $4,300. Value before he finished the paperwork. $10,000 went into a trip and a laptop, which are real value but which produce no future dollars. $25,000 went into an index fund. That is the only line item on the list that compounds. So, of the original $100,000, exactly 25% of it was still working 20 years later. Now here's the second half, and this is where the middle-class pattern really shows itself. 4 of those 6 decisions did not just consume money once. They created new monthly obligations. The bigger house came with a bigger mortgage payment, a bigger tax bill, and a bigger insurance premium. The new SUV came with a $640 payment, higher insurance, and a maintenance schedule his old truck never had. This is the pattern almost nobody names out loud. So let me name it clearly. The middle-class default converts a one-time windfall into a permanent increase in fixed monthly costs. The millionaire default does the opposite. It converts a one-time windfall into a permanent decrease in required future work. Same $100,000. 2 completely opposite effects on the rest of the household's life. $40,000 into a house feels like the safest thing on John's entire list. It is not spending. It is not consumption. It is equity. It is an asset. Everyone says so. So let's be precise about what that $40,000 actually purchased. It did not buy $40,000 of house. It bought access to a house that cost $120,000 more than the old one, which means the mortgage went up by roughly $80,000 at 6.5% over 30 years. That is an extra $506 a month in principal and interest every month for 360 months. Property tax on the additional $120,000 of assessed value adds. About $110 a month. Homeowners insurance on the larger structure adds about $35 a month. Total increase in required monthly outflow, roughly $650 indefinitely. Now invest that $650 a month at 8% for the same 20 years we are already measuring. It becomes $382,872. Read that number again because it is larger than the entire gap we started this video with. The $40,000 down payment did not cost John $40,000. It cost him $382,872 in foregone compounding. And it did that quietly, $650 at a time, in an amount too small to ever feel like a decision. Now, before you dismiss this, hear the fair version. The house you live in is not a bad thing. The school district is real. The 12 minutes back is real. Those are legitimate purchases of life quality. The problem is not the house. The problem is that the house was priced as an asset and paid for as an expense. Federal Reserve data shows 66% of American households own a primary residence, and only 21% hold a brokerage account. 3 times as many households own the illiquid, cost-generating asset as own the liquid, cash-generating one. That single ratio explains more about the middle class than any mindset video ever will. They do, constantly. That is not the difference either. Carla moved money in 7 of the 20 years we are tracking. She rebalanced. She harvested losses twice. She sold $14,000 of index funds in 2033 to cover a medical deductible and a roof. Touching the money is not the sin. Where the money lives is what matters. Here's the part that took me the longest to understand about how millionaires actually operate. They do not think about investments. They think about containers. The container determines the tax treatment, and the tax treatment determines how much of the return you keep. In 2026, the IRS lets you defer $24,500 into a 401k. At age 50 and over, $32,500. Between ages 60 and 63, the catch-up jumps to $11,250 instead of the standard $8,000. An IRA takes another $7,500, with an additional $100 if you are 50 or older. A health savings account takes $4,400 for self-only coverage, or $8,750 for family coverage. Add those up for a married couple over 50 and you are looking at well over $80,000 of tax advantage space per year. Most middle-class households leave the majority of that space completely empty every single year, permanently. Unused contribution room does not roll forward. December 31st arrives and the space is simply gone. Meet Maya, Maya is 28, earns $64,000, and is genuinely good with money. She has $38,000 in a high-yield savings account earning 4.1%, and she is proud of it. She checks the balance twice a week and the number always goes up, which feels like winning. But Maya has never opened a Roth IRA, so that $38,000 is fully taxable interest every year. At her bracket, she keeps about 3.1% of that 4.1% after federal and state. Tax. Inflation ran 2.8%. Her real return on $38,000 is roughly 0.3%, or $114 a year. She is not making a mistake in her behavior. Her behavior is excellent. She is making a mistake in her container, and the container is worth more than the behavior. Ramsey's study found that 8 out of 10 millionaires invested in their company 401k, and 3 out of 4 also invested outside it. 2 containers running in parallel for decades. That is the entire architecture. This is the most under-discussed wealth destroyer in American personal finance, and the numbers are staggering. When Americans leave a job, roughly 1 in 3 cash out their 401k balance entirely. One academic dataset tracked 162,360 terminating employees across 28 retirement plans. 41.4% of them cashed out at separation, and most drained the entire account. Among hourly workers, the number is 42%. Among salaried workers, it is 21%. The Center for Retirement Research estimates that this leakage leaves final retirement balances about 20% smaller. 20% permanently erased, not by a market crash, but by paperwork nobody wanted to do. Meet Diana. Diana is 34 and has changed jobs 4 times in 11 years, which is completely normal now. Twice, the balance was under $9,000 and the rollover form looked complicated, so she took the check. The first time she got $6,340 after a 10% penalty in taxes. She used it for a security deposit. The second time she got $5,180 and used it to cover 3 months between jobs. Diana did nothing morally wrong. Both times, the money solved a real problem. But those 2 accounts, left alone at 8% until she turned 65, would have been worth $174,000. She converted $174,000 of future money into $11,520 of present money, and the paperwork made the decision for her. Now back to John, because this is exactly what happened to him. In 2035, 9 years into our 20-year window, John's company restructured and he took a package. His brokerage account and his old 401k were both sitting there, and the severance was thinner than expected. His $25,000 had grown to $49,975 over those 9 years, which felt like an enormous amount of money. He liquidated it. After a 10% early withdrawal penalty, 22% federal, and 5% state, he kept $31,384. That money bridged 11 months of a job search. It genuinely helped. It genuinely worked, and it cost him $116,524 because that $25,000 left completely alone would have been worth exactly that in 2046. He then restarted from zero, contributing $500 a month for the remaining 11 years. 11 years of disciplined monthly investing produced $105,289, which is where our number from the opening comes from. Everything in this video collapses into one operating rule, and it is not about investing at all. When a millionaire receives a windfall, they ask what it removes from the monthly number. When the middle class receives a windfall, they ask what it adds to the life. Both questions are reasonable. Only one of them compounds. Carla's $100,000 removed nothing and added nothing to her monthly obligations. He just sat there working. John's $100,000 added roughly $650 a month in housing costs and $640 a month in car payments. His household expense floor rose by about $1,290 a month permanently, funded by a one-time payment. That is the trap. And it is a trap precisely because every individual decision inside it was defensible. Here is the reframe that changes how you will see every windfall for the rest of your life. A windfall is not money. A windfall is a one-time chance to change your monthly number. You can push the monthly number up, which converts freedom into stuff. You can push it down, which converts stuff into freedom. Or you can leave it exactly where it is and let the money compound, which is what Carla did. Notice that nothing in that framework requires you to be frugal, disciplined, or particularly smart. It requires you to ask a different question in the first 72 hours, once, and then stop thinking about it. most middle-class households never ask the question because nobody ever told them there, was 1. The moment money appears, so does a specific cast of characters, and every one of them is confident. John got advice from 5 different people in the 6 weeks his money sat in checking. The car salesman told him that with $18,000 down, he qualified for the premium trim at the same monthly payment. That sentence is technically true and financially devastating because the payment stayed flat by stretching the term to 84 months, 7 years of payments on a vehicle that will be worth $9,000 in year 5. The salesman was not lying. He was answering the question John asked, which was about the monthly payment. The bank teller offered him an 18-month certificate of deposit at 4.15%, which sounded genuinely responsible. $100,000 at 4.15% for 18 months returns about $6,300 before tax and roughly $4,700 after. That same $100,000 in a broad index fund over 18 months has no guarantee, but it also has no ceiling. Certificates of deposit are not a bad product. They are a bad container for money with a 20-year job to do. John's father told him to pay off the mortgage. That advice was correct in 1984. When mortgage rates hit 13.9%, at 6.5% against an expected 8% return, it is arithmetic that no longer works the way it once did. His father is not wrong about the principle. He is applying a rate environment that ended 40 years ago. A friend from work told him to put $20,000 into 3 individual stocks he had been following. That advice would have produced either a very good story or a very expensive one, with no way to know in advance. And a financial advisor offered him a variable annuity, with a 6.5% surrender charge and 2.4% in annual fees. On $100,000, that is $2,400 a year, every year, which compounds against him for as long as he holds it. Over 20 years, a 2.4% annual drag on an 8% return turns $466.96 into roughly $293,000. That single product decision would have cost more than the down payment, the car, and the vacation combined. Here is the pattern underneath all 5 of those conversations, and it is worth memorizing. Every person who showed up with advice was answering a question about the next 12 months. Nobody in the room was answering a question about the next 20 years. Carla received the same 5 offers. She did not evaluate any of them on the merits. She had already written the rule before the money existed, and the rule made all 5 conversations unnecessary. That is the actual advantage, not judgment under pressure, the removal of the need for judgment under pressure. Now here's the part that almost nobody surfaces, and it reframes the entire comparison. The gap between John and Carla is not a returns gap. And it is not really a savings rate gap either. It is an interruption gap. An interruption is uniquely expensive because of where compounding does its work. Take $100,000 at 8% and let it run for 30 years. It becomes $1,666. Now look at when that $1 million actually arrives. After 13 years, the balance is $271,962, which means 13 years of growth produced $171,962 of gain. After 25 years, it is $684,148. After 30, it is $1,266. The final 5 years alone produced $321,118. 5 years generated almost twice what the first 13 years generated, from the same money, at the same rate. Compounding is not a smooth curve. It is 13 boring years followed by an explosion you have to still be present for, which means every interruption does something worse than lose money. It resets your position on the curve. When John cashed out in 2035, he did not lose. 49,975, he lost his seat in the back half of the curve. He restarted at year 0 with 11 years left, which is the flat, boring, unrewarding part. 11 years of disciplined $500 a month investing produced 105,289s, and he did everything right during those 11 years. Carla did nothing at all during those same 11 years, and her account added $242,000. That is the whole video in one sentence, so let me say it plainly. The middle class does not lose to the market. It loses to the restart. And this is why the Millionaires rule looks so unimpressive from the outside. It is not a strategy. It is a refusal to be the reason the compounding stopped. Every mechanism we covered points at the same thing. The 72-hour window prevents an interruption. The container prevents an interruption. Not raising the monthly number prevents an interruption. Rolling over the 401k instead of cashing it out prevents an interruption. None of it is about picking. All of it is about not restarting. So the next time $100,000 shows up in your life, whether it arrives as an inheritance, a bonus, a settlement, or a sale, you already know the two paths. One of them raises your monthly number and feels like progress. The other one leaves your monthly number exactly where it is and feels like nothing happened at all. 20 years later, one of those feelings is worth $807 more than the other. And if you are wondering how to handle a windfall that is genuinely too large, for a brokerage account to be the right answer, that is a completely different conversation involving trusts, tax lots, and a real advisor. But for now, the next time someone tells you the wealthy just made smarter investments, ask them one question. Ask them how many times the wealthy person started over. Because the number of restarts is the only variable in this entire comparison that either household actually controlled. John did not have a worse plan than Carla. He had the same plan 4 separate times from the beginning. If this showed you something you did not know was happening with your money, subscribe to Desmond Wealth and hit the notification bell. We break down the hidden math behind the financial decisions you face every day. Do the math. Make the decision that matches your reality, not someone else's sales pitch.